Florida. Beaches, sunshine, and vanishing acts. Over the past 50 years, dozens have stepped out for groceries, walks, court dates, even bedtime, and were never seen again. No blood, no crime scene, just silence. From toddlers to firefighters, students to grandmothers, this is a state where people don't just go missing, they disappear like smoke in a thunderstorm. These are the 33 most haunting, bizarre, and unsolved missing persons cases in Florida history. Some left footprints, some left nothing, and some left questions that still scream in the dark. You've heard of Florida Man. Now meet Florida Missing. Before we dive in, if you're into deep dives, dark mysteries, and stories that won't let go, hit that subscribe button. We're building a community of curious minds, one cold case at a time. Drop a comment below. Where are you watching from? And what time is it right now? Are you midnight scrolling in Miami or tuning in over coffee in Portland? Let's light up that map. Now, back to the missing. Jennifer Kessa, 24. It started with a morning routine just like any other. Jennifer Kessa, 24 years old, woke up in her Orlando condo on the 24th of January, 2006. She likely showered, got dressed, packed her bag, and stepped out the door as she always did. A finance manager with a bright future, a boyfriend, and a tight-knit family, Jennifer had no reason to vanish, and yet she did, completely, without struggle, without sound, without even a whisper of a goodbye. What makes this case legendary in Florida missing persons lore isn't just the silence but the perfect wrongness of it. Jennifer wasn't some transient or troubled soul. She was safe, stable, and sane. The kind of person who answered texts fast, kept her calendar obsessively, and never missed a day of work. So when she didn't show up at her job that Tuesday, red flags weren't just raised, they were launched into orbit. Her parents, Drew and Joyce Kessa, knew something was wrong within minutes of her no-show. They drove straight from Tampa to her condo. Nothing was out of place except Jennifer. Her clothes from the day before were there. Her makeup, her jewelry, her phone charger was still plugged in. Even the shower looked recently used. It was like she got ready and then vanished mid-step, like something reached out from the veil and pulled her out of the frame before she even made it to the elevator. But then came the car. A black Chevy Malibu, Jennifer's car, was discovered 2 days later, just 1 mile away. It was parked in a visitor's spot at an apartment complex called Huntington on the Green. Inside were all the clues and all the contradictions. Her cell phone, iPod, purse, and briefcase, all missing. But the car was wiped clean. Not a single usable fingerprint, not even hers. Then, the CCTV footage emerged. Not from her condo, not from the road, but from the apartment complex where her car was left. Security cameras captured a person parking her car around noon on the day she disappeared. The figure got out. Walked away like they had all the time in the world. But here's where it becomes surreal. In what feels like a cosmic joke, the camera captured the figure at 3 points. Each time their face was perfectly blocked by a gatepost. Not once, not twice, but 3 perfect moments of obscured identity. Law enforcement dubbed him the Phantom. Gender unknown. Height, average. Clothes, nondescript. Gait, unmemorable. In the digital age, with high-definition everything and algorithms that can identify your grandma from a 1,993 yearbook photo, this was all we had. A faceless blur walking away from a missing woman's car, framed like a glitch in the Matrix. Detectives dug in. Interviews, polygraphs, canvassing. Jennifer's boyfriend was questioned, but quickly cleared. Eyes turned toward the workers at her condo complex renovation contractors, many of whom didn't speak English and weren't vetted. Jennifer had reportedly told family she felt uncomfortable around them. One had even whistled at her. But again, no evidence, no motive, no trace. Her phone pinged near the condo around the time she disappeared. Then silence. Her bank accounts were untouched. Her social security number never surfaced. No one claimed to have seen her, heard from her, or received a ransom. This wasn't a runaway. It wasn't a robbery gone wrong. It wasn't anything. And yet it was everything. Over the years, the Kesse family pushed harder than most families ever could. They launched independent investigations, took over the case from Orlando police, hired private investigators, bought billboards, pleaded on national television. But with every new theory came a new dead end. The case, once a national headline, became a cold whisper in Florida's humid air. And here's the thing that hits like a punch to the ribs. Jennifer vanished in broad daylight in a major city in the 21st century. She left behind no struggle, no note, no mess. Just a pair of high heels neatly tucked under her bed, a damp towel, and a missing future. No one knows where she went, or how, or why. But someone does. And maybe that someone was watching when Michelle Parker disappeared. Michelle Parker, 33. The 17th of November, 2011, began with reality television. Not the kind that ends with a rose or a tribal council. This was the courtroom kind, where exes air their grudges on syndicated daytime shows. Michelle Parker, a 3-year-old Orlando mother of 3, was featured that morning on an episode of The People's Court. She and her ex-fiancé, Dale Smith, had appeared on the show to argue over a lost engagement ring. Michelle's case aired at 2 p.m. Eastern. By 3:30 p.m., she was gone. Vanished. Erased. And Florida got another mystery added to its growing list of disappearances that make even the most seasoned investigators feel like they're drowning in quicksand. Michelle was vibrant, busy, and kind of a force of nature. She had twin toddlers and an 1-year-old son from a previous relationship. She worked as a bartender and occasionally helped run a mobile spray tan business. She juggled kids, jobs, and court drama like it was her default setting. People who knew her said she was fiercely protective of her children, someone who wouldn't just vanish without a word. And yet, by that Thursday afternoon, not a single person could reach her. Her phone stopped pinging around 4 p.m. The final signal was near a cell tower just west of downtown Orlando. Her black Hummer H3, the kind of car you don't just misplace, was found the next day, abandoned in a shady part of town, with her decal-covered license plate and her belongings still inside. It was parked near an apartment complex, left like an afterthought. No signs of Michelle, no signs of a struggle. Just a vehicle in neutral and a silence loud enough to crush. Police immediately turned to the last person known to see her, Dale Smith. Dale was no stranger to controversy. He and Michelle had a turbulent relationship, to put it lightly. They had fought frequently. She'd filed a restraining order against him in 2009, citing verbal and emotional issues. It had since expired, but the tension between them hadn't positively. Still, Michelle wanted to co-parent peacefully. She'd gone to his house that day to drop off their twins, like she always did. It should have been routine. But this time, she didn't come back. Smith's behavior after her disappearance raised eyebrows. He didn't help in the search. He lawyered up almost immediately. His history dishonorably discharged from the Marines. Prior battery charges didn't help the optics. But police never named him a suspect, only a person of interest. And in America, that difference is everything. So they searched. They searched. Volunteers combed through wooded areas and retention ponds. Helicopters circled over highways and swamps. Dive teams dragged lakes. Thousands of tips poured in, many from viewers who'd watched her television appearance and felt a gut punch of dread. But no, Michelle. The media, as it does, swarmed. The case had everything: a missing mother, a daytime court show, a dramatic breakup, and a car dumped in a bad part of town. Nancy Grace covered it. Dr. Phil got involved. For a few weeks, Michelle Parker was everywhere. And then, just as quickly as the attention came, it vanished too. But her family didn't. Her mother, Yvonne Stewart, became the face of heartbreak and perseverance. She put up signs, held vigils, gave interviews, and stared into cameras with the desperate calm only a mother can fake. Her voice shook but never broke. Her mission was unwavering: bring Michelle home. Years passed. In 2013, Michelle was legally declared dead. A grim milestone without any closure. No body, no arrest, no final chapter. Just a mother still standing, a family still hoping, and a silence that grew heavier with time. In 2018, the family filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Dale Smith, pointing fingers where the law couldn't. But even that didn't break the stalemate. The case remains cold, the Hummer long towed, the headlines faded into digital archives. Michelle's disappearance leaves behind an unsettling question. How can someone disappear right after their face is broadcast to millions? She wasn't traveling. She wasn't out of state. She wasn't off the grid. She was just gone. A mother of 3 walks into her ex's house to drop off her kids, hours after a tense courtroom reality, television airing, and simply never returns. No camera caught her leaving. No one saw her face again. The only thing left behind was a parked Hummer and 1,000 broken theories. And now, as we travel backward in time to 1989, another Florida woman, Tiffany Sessions, will step out for a walk and never return, creating a mystery that has haunted Gainesville for over 3 decades. 2 disappearances, 2 women, and not a single trace. And we're only just getting started. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. We're just scratching the surface of Florida's darkest mysteries. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from, and what time is it on your clock right now? Midnight deep dive? Lunch break rabbit hole? We want to know. Now, on to the next one. Tiffany Sessions, 20. The 9th of February, 1989. Gainesville, Florida. Tiffany Sessions, a 20-year-old junior at the University of Florida, left her apartment around 4 p.m. for a quick power walk. That's it. No late-night party, no bad crowd, no shady detours. She laced up her white Reebok sneakers, grabbed her Walkman, said goodbye to her roommate, and told her she'd be back in an hour. She never was. In the decades since, the phrase, "I'll be right back," has taken on a chilling permanence in Gainesville because Tiffany never returned. And no one, not friends, not family, not authorities, has ever been able to explain why. Tiffany Ellen Sessions was everything you'd expect from a go-getter. She was majoring in business, wore pearls like armor, and kept planners filled to the margins with tasks, dates, and goals. Her family called her driven. Her friends said she was funny, stubborn, and always 5 minutes early. She was a daddy's girl too. Her father, Patrick Sessions, was a Miami banking executive who would later become Florida's most tireless crusader for missing children. But he had no way of knowing, on that sunny Thursday, that his life was about to be split in 2, before and after 4 p.m. The walk route was simple. A paved path along Archer Road, a suburban stretch surrounded by brush and scattered trees. Tiffany had taken that walk dozens of times. It wasn't isolated, and it wasn't nighttime. There were other people out, students jogging, retirees walking dogs, cyclists zipping past, yet not one of them remembered seeing her. She just disappeared. Her roommate, concerned when Tiffany hadn't come back by dinner time, called friends, then her parents, then the police. And here's where the timeline gets fuzzy and frustrating. In 1989, missing adult cases didn't trigger immediate panic. College students, especially, were often assumed to have taken off on their own for a bit. A spontaneous trip, a stress break, a fight with a boyfriend. Police didn't treat Tiffany's disappearance like an emergency. Not at first. But her family knew better, within 24 hours, Tiffany's parents were in Gainesville, printing flyers and organizing search parties themselves. Her father, leveraging every contact from his high-powered business world, poured resources into the case. Billboards were rented. Private detectives were hired. Helicopters were launched. A database of known sex offenders in the area was compiled before most departments even knew how to spell digital records. Still no Tiffany. Her Walkman? Missing. Her white visor? Gone. Her ID and keys? Left behind in the apartment. There were no signs of struggle. No witnesses. No trail. Just an empty walking path and a family unraveling in slow motion. Over the years, the leads came and went like Florida thunderstorms. Quick, loud, gone. One tip said she was spotted in Tampa. Another, in Louisiana. Psychics called in with visions. Jailhouse informants spun tales for reduced sentences. At one point, it seemed like every lead pointed in a different direction, each one less plausible than the last. But then, in 2001, 12 years after, Tiffany vanished, a name surfaced that would twist the case into a darker, more horrifying shape. Michael Curtis, a convicted killer serving time for the murder of another young woman in Florida. He had been in Gainesville around the time of Tiffany's disappearance. He'd confessed off the record to a fellow inmate that he had abducted and murdered Tiffany Sessions. That confession was never formally recorded, never admissible in court. But it was enough for authorities to name him a person of interest in 2014. Here's where things get more frustrating than informative. Curtis died in prison in 2009. The timeline fit, his pattern of behavior fit, but there was no physical evidence, no DNA, no recovered belongings, no verified witnesses connecting him to Tiffany. So the case, like so many others, stalled again. But what sets this case apart isn't just the haunting silence, it's the legacy Tiffany left behind. Her father, Patrick Sessions, didn't just search, he fought. He helped build Florida's missing children infrastructure. He worked with law enforcement across the country. He transformed his grief into advocacy. In many ways, Tiffany's face became the reason other children were found. She was never just missing. She became a symbol for every unsolved case that needed attention, resources, and compassion. But for all his tireless work, Patrick Sessions never found his daughter. No body, no grave, no closure. Just a final image. A smiling, blonde college student in a white sweatshirt stepping out for a walk on a bright afternoon, listening to music on her Walkman and vanishing into myth. 3 decades later, the walking trail still remains. Locals jog by the spot where she was last seen, unaware of the phantom that still lingers in the air. Tiffany's case remains one of Florida's most famous unsolved disappearances. And yet, for all its infamy, it shares one terrifying detail with another case just south in Naples. A man who was last seen during a traffic stop and never seen again. His name was Terrence Williams. Terrence Williams, 27. It was a Sunday morning, the 12th of January, 2004. Terrence Williams, 27, was driving in Naples, Florida, heading home after a night out with friends. He didn't have a valid driver's license. His white Cadillac was in rough shape, and he had reason to be careful. That morning, he wasn't. Around 9 a.m., a Collier County Sheriff's deputy named Stephen Calkins spotted the car parked awkwardly on the side of the road near a local cemetery. According to reports, Calkins claimed he stopped to check on the vehicle, found it abandoned, and later had it towed. But that version of the story starts to warp the second it hits daylight. Because Terrence wasn't missing when the car was first spotted. A local cemetery worker came forward and said otherwise he'd seen the entire interaction. Terrence had been pulled over. He watched Calkins pat him down, talk to him, then put him in the back of his patrol car. No cuffs, just a casual detainment. Terrence was never seen again. This is where the whole case tilts, off axis. Calkins didn't file an arrest, didn't report a transport, didn't log an incident. There was no radio call, no entry in his cruiser's system, nothing. It was as if Terrence Williams had never existed except, of course, for the Cadillac, which was inexplicably towed hours later. When Terrence didn't return home that evening, his family went into full panic mode. He was close to his mother, Marcia, and lived with his roommate, Jason Gonzalez. He had a steady job. He was a father, not the kind of man to ghost his life. Within 48 hours, his mother was filing a missing person report and hitting a wall of silence. Then came the detail that turned this into a Florida-sized storm cloud. Terrence wasn't the first to vanish after an encounter with Deputy Calkins. 3 months earlier, the 1st of October, 2003, another man had disappeared under eerily similar circumstances. His name? Felipe Santos. Felipe, a 24-year-old Mexican immigrant and construction worker, was last seen in the back of Calkins' patrol car after a minor fender bender. Calkins said he was taking him to a Circle K gas station so he could find a ride home. There was no arrest, no report, no booking, and no Felipe ever again. 2 men, both of color, both without valid driver's licenses, both taken into the back of the same deputy's car, both never seen again, in the same county. Within 90 days, when investigators began connecting the dots, the timeline got even uglier. Calkins was evasive during questioning. His stories about Terrence shifted. First, he said he never saw Terrence at all. Then he admitted to seeing him, but claimed he just gave him a courtesy ride to a nearby Circle K. That was his signature move, apparently. The problem? Surveillance footage from the gas station showed nothing. No Terrence, no deputy, no drop-off. At one point, Calkins called dispatch with a bizarre, almost mocking tone, mispronouncing Terrence's name, joking about the Cadillac being a homie car. His words were flippant, detached, as if the man in the back seat was just a footnote. The department fired Calkins in 2004 after inconsistencies in his statements and his failure to cooperate with investigators. But despite the swirling suspicions, no charges were filed, no arrests. No evidence ever surfaced, no blood, no belongings, no DNA. Just 2 men whose last known moments were inside the same vehicle driven by the same man who walked away untouched. Terrence's mother, Marcia Williams, became a force of nature. She refused to let her son become just another statistic. She printed flyers, knocked on doors, faced down press conferences with unflinching resolve. In 2012, she got an unlikely ally, actor and activist Tyler Perry, who offered a $100,000 reward for information in the case. Together, they pushed the case back into national headlines. But even money and media couldn't pierce the silence. The FBI got involved, so did state investigators. Each time, hope flickered and then dimmed again. Years passed, the case remained open, but Terrence, like Felipe, remained nowhere. And Calkins? He maintained his innocence, lived quietly, and, as of today, has never been charged with anything in connection to either man's disappearance. The story of Terrence Williams isn't just a missing person case, it's a story about the invisible line between official duty and unanswered accountability. It's a modern Florida mystery soaked in questions and shadow. And while Terrence's name still echoes in vigils and justice marches, Felipe Santos, the man who vanished first, is the one whose story now loops back in time to complete this double disappearance. Felipe Santos, 24. The 1st of October, 2003. Immokalee, Florida, morning. Felipe Santos, a 24-year-old Mexican immigrant and construction worker, kissed his wife goodbye and headed off for work. He was running late. Again. The kind of late that comes with speeding through back roads and rolling through stop signs. At around 6:30 a.m., on a sleepy stretch of road in Naples, he rear-ended another vehicle. Minor fender bender, no injuries, no damage to write home about. But when the deputy arrived on the scene, Stephen Calkins, of the Collier County Sheriff's Office, the ordinary turned ominous. Calkins didn't issue a ticket. He didn't cite Felipe. Instead, he offered a solution. He'd drive Felipe to the nearby Circle K so he could call his employer and arrange for a ride. A courtesy transport, as the lingo goes. No handcuffs, no formal arrest. Just a casual ride in the back seat of a patrol car, supposedly bound for a gas station 3 miles away. That was the last time anyone saw Felipe Santos alive. Now, if you've been paying attention, you already feel the icy grip of déjà vu, because 4 months later, another man, Terrence Williams, would vanish under strikingly similar circumstances after a nearly identical courtesy ride from the same deputy. Different man, same patrol car. Same missing ending. Back to Felipe. His brothers, especially Jorge and Luciano Santos, immediately sensed something was off. Felipe wasn't the kind of man to disappear. He worked long hours, sent money back to family, kept his nose down, had no history of running, and most importantly, he didn't have the luxury of vanishing. He had a wife and young child to support. The moment Felipe didn't return home that evening, the family went into high alert. They called the sheriff's office. They checked hospitals. They canvassed the neighborhood. It wasn't until they spoke with the other driver involved in the fender bender that they learned a Collier County deputy had taken Felipe from the scene. The officer's name? Stephen Calkins. Here's where the timeline starts to corrode. Calkins, in his initial statement, confirmed he'd picked up Felipe. He claimed Felipe seemed nervous and was vague about his immigration status, but rather than booking him, Calkins said he changed his mind, found Felipe polite and cooperative, and decided to drop him at the Circle K so he could make arrangements with his boss, a favor. That's the story. Except there was no record of the drop-off, no security footage, no clerk recall, no Felipe. When asked why he didn't file a report or notify dispatch, Calkins offered only vague explanations. He forgot. He got busy. It didn't seem important. But it was important. Very. The Santos family filed a missing persons report within 24 hours. They pushed hard, made noise, got the media involved, but little traction came from law enforcement. The lack of urgency mirrored what would happen again months later with Terrence Williams. Except Felipe's family faced another barrier language. Their pleas often went untranslated, unacknowledged, unheard. And the twist? Calkins didn't face consequences, not then. At the time, the department accepted his version of events. There were no charges, no reprimand, and no internal investigation launched. In a vacuum, it might have ended there, just another strange case that slipped through the cracks. But after Terrence Williams vanished in January 2004, the eerie similarities between the two cases became impossible to ignore. Two men. Both disappeared after being placed in the back of Deputy Calkins' patrol car. Both allegedly dropped off at gas stations. Both undocumented or lacking licenses. Neither seen again. The public reaction was slow at first. This wasn't the age of viral awareness or TikTok detectives. But as the families started connecting dots, so did journalists. So did independent investigators. The more they pulled on the thread, the more the story unraveled into a haunting pattern. In 2004, following mounting pressure and inconsistencies in his statements about both men, Calkins was fired from the sheriff's office. But that's as far as it went. No charges, no arrests. Just termination and silence. The FBI later got involved, but the lack of physical evidence hamstrung the investigation. The patrol car had long been cleaned and returned. No GPS logs, no dash cam. Just word against word, and in this case, two men weren't around to give theirs. Over the years, Felipe's family, like the Williams family, kept pushing, quietly, persistently. They never stopped asking questions, never stopped wondering, never stopped hoping. Felipe's daughter grew up without a father. His wife moved on, but not without pain. His brothers still visit the empty places where he might have been. And maybe the most haunting thing? If Terrence hadn't disappeared 4 months later, Felipe's case might have remained buried under red tape and language barriers. It took 2 disappearances to spark attention. Even then, justice has stayed elusive. One man vanished, then another. Same car, same cop, same void. And that void would only deepen 5 years later in rural Putnam County, when a 5-year-old girl named Haley Cummings went to sleep in her bed and was never seen again. Haley Cummings. The 9th of February, 2009, Satsuma, Florida. A dot on the map in Putnam County, dense woods, dirt roads, and the kind of small-town silence where every creak in the floorboards feels personal. 5-year-old Haley Cummings went to bed in a single-wide trailer off Green Lane. By morning, she was gone. No broken windows, no kicked-in doors, no alarm. Just an empty bed, a wide-eyed 7-year-old babysitter, and a mystery that unraveled into one of the most complex and bizarre missing child cases in Florida history. Let's rewind. Haley lived with her father, Ronald Cummings, a 5-year-old working at a local job site, and Misty Crosland, his teenage girlfriend. On the night of the 9th of February, Ronald was on a late shift. Misty was home with Haley and her younger brother, sleeping in the same room. According to Misty, she woke up around 3 a.m. and found the kitchen light on. Haley was gone. The back door, one of those flimsy storm doors common in trailers, was propped open with a cinder block. Panic followed. At 3:27 a.m., Misty called 911. Her voice, frantic, breathless, confused. Ronald arrived shortly after, yelling into the phone, accusing whoever took her of being dead already. It was chaos, raw, unfiltered. Police arrived quickly, then dogs, then media, then helicopters. But no Haley. In the days that followed, search teams combed through the nearby woods, drained ponds, and sifted through trash piles. Hundreds of volunteers poured into the swamps with sticks and hope. Flyers went up across the state. Ronald and Misty appeared on every local station, pleading, crying, sometimes snapping at reporters. But something in the story didn't sit right, especially with Misty. Her timeline shifted. First, she said she went to bed at 10 p.m. Then it was midnight. She claimed she didn't hear anything, then said maybe she did. She pointed fingers, then retracted. She claimed to have no idea what happened, then later implied she might know more than she said. And as days turned into weeks, that crack in the story grew into a canyon. The public was split. Some saw Misty as a scared, overwhelmed teen, too young to process trauma. Others saw her as hiding something. The investigators, meanwhile, saw contradictions, inconsistencies, and then a motive. Haley's father and Misty had a rocky relationship. Fights, breakups, rumors of infidelity, rumors of drugs. The kind of volatility that makes for tabloid drama, but more importantly, the kind that sets off alarm bells for law enforcement. Ronald had a record. Misty had a record. Neither was a stranger to local authorities. But neither was ever charged in connection to Haley's disappearance. That didn't stop the implosion. In the months after the disappearance, the pressure cooked the family from the inside. Ronald and Misty got married in March, just a month after Haley went missing. To keep the family together, they said. They divorced by December. What happened in between was a slow-motion collapse. By 2010, investigators were no longer treating Haley's case as a hopeful search. It had shifted to a recovery mission, and then a full criminal investigation. The turning point came not from new evidence, but from Misty Crosland herself. In a jailhouse conversation after she'd been arrested on unrelated drug trafficking charges, Misty allegedly told a cousin that she knew what happened to Haley. She claimed Haley had died accidentally and that her body had been disposed of in a black garbage bag in the St. Johns River. Other jailhouse informants added layers to the story. A cousin, a friend, a different location, always shifting. Authorities drained parts of the river, found animal bones, tires. Nothing conclusive. No Haley. To this day, no one has been charged with kidnapping or harming Haley Cummings. Misty is still serving time on drug charges. Ronald, too. The case remains open, technically active. But with no arrests and no confirmed remains, it has become something else. A Southern Gothic tale, retold again and again in Florida headlines, always circling the same question. How does a child disappear from a locked home with adults inside? Haley's photo is still circulated by missing children's organizations. Blonde hair, blue eyes, a gap-toothed smile that looks back at you like she knows something you don't. She'd be in high school now. Maybe college, but to most of Florida, she'll always be 5, in pink pajamas, gone into the night without a trace. And just over a decade earlier, another child in Florida, a baby just 5 months old, disappeared from her crib. No footprints, no cries, just a baby monitor gone quiet, and a family left forever in limbo. Her name was Sabrina Eisenberg. Sabrina Eisenberg. The 24th of November, 1997. Valrico, Florida. A calm Monday morning, just outside Tampa. The kind of morning where the grass is still damp from dew, and the neighborhood is waking up with coffee, cartoons, and clinking cereal bowls. But in the Eisenberg home, nestled in a tidy, middle-class subdivision, the normal morning rhythm shattered into something silent, hollow, and unimaginable. Marlene Eisenberg entered her 5-month-old daughter's nursery just after 6 a.m. and found the crib empty. Sabrina Paige Eisenberg, born the 27th of June, was gone. No crying, no thud, no broken windows, no forced doors, just an open garage, a dog that didn't bark, and a house that was somehow still despite the gaping hole left behind. She'd last been seen alive around midnight when her parents, Marlene and Steve, checked on her. They kissed her goodnight, wrapped her in her blanket, and went to bed. A baby monitor crackled softly in the background. Her older siblings, ages 4 and 8, were asleep in their rooms. All doors were locked, except, apparently, the garage. By sunrise, the scene had flipped from ordinary to inexplicable. Steve Eisenberg called 911 at 6:42 a.m. His voice was too composed, some would later argue. "We believe someone came in and took our baby," he said. Police arrived within minutes. They combed through the house. The crib still made, the blanket folded. No sign of forced entry. No signs of a struggle. Nothing missing except a 5-month-old girl who couldn't crawl, couldn't walk, couldn't cry for help. Word spread fast. A baby gone from a crib is a rare kind of nightmare. The media swooped in. Flyers appeared across Hillsborough County. Volunteers searched fields, woods, culverts. Law enforcement mobilized quickly, but almost immediately. Suspicion didn't point outward, it curved sharply inward. Within days, Steve and Marlene Eisenberg went from grieving parents to subjects of national scrutiny. Their interviews to some seemed mechanical. Steve's calm, Marlene's lack of visible emotion. The media clipped their statements for evening news packages that left viewers raising eyebrows. They hired lawyers early, declined polygraphs, held press conferences with coached language. Their behavior, filtered through the harsh lens of public expectation, didn't sit well. Then, the wiretaps. In December, just weeks after Sabrina's disappearance, the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office, working with federal agents, secured a warrant to bug the Eisenberg home. The goal: catch them saying something, anything, that could crack the case. And according to prosecutors, they did. The transcripts were explosive. Allegedly, Marlene was recorded saying, "The baby's dead and buried," while Steve allegedly admitted to using cocaine and hiding the truth from the police. It was enough to draw federal indictments. In 1999, the Eisenbergs were charged with conspiracy and making false statements. It should have been the breakthrough moment. But it wasn't. Because those tapes, the linchpin of the case, were garbage. The recordings were barely audible, indecipherable, full of background noise, clicks, static. When analysts tried to confirm the damning quotes, they couldn't. Defense attorneys claimed the transcripts were fantasy. Worse, they accused investigators of lying to obtain the wiretap in the first place, fabricating statements and misleading the court. The judge agreed. The charges were dropped, the tapes were thrown out, and the case against the Eisenbergs crumbled like wet sand. In the aftermath, the government was forced to pay their legal fees over $1 million. It was one of the most humiliating prosecutorial misfires in Florida history. And while the legal storm passed, the central question remained painfully intact. Where is Sabrina? Steve and Marlene moved out of Florida, raised their other 2 children away from the public eye. Over the years, they've appeared sporadically in interviews, continuing to maintain their innocence. They believe Sabrina was kidnapped and that she may still be alive. Age-progressed photos show a girl with long brown hair, wide eyes, and a smile that hints at her baby pictures. Every few years, her case resurfaces in the press. A tip in Texas, a girl in Illinois, a false match in New York. Each time, hope rises like steam and then vanishes just as fast. The case remains officially unsolved. No suspects, no evidence, no remains, not even a clear theory. Just a house that went quiet in the night and a family that was left in the crosshairs of a media firestorm. Today, Sabrina would be 28. Her room is long gone. The house is sold. The crib has disappeared. But for anyone who studied missing persons in Florida, her name is etched in bold. Not just for the mystery, but for what it revealed about how quickly a tragedy can spiral into spectacle. And if Sabrina's case was a tragedy that revealed cracks in the justice system, the next disappearance exposed something even darker: cracks in the system meant to protect the vulnerable. Because Rillia Wilson was already in the system when she vanished. She was supposed to be safe. But she wasn't. 7 gone. 7 lives interrupted mid-sentence, and every single one still unsolved. If this kind of storytelling pulls you in, subscribe to the channel. We're unraveling the most haunting cases, one by one. And while you're here, drop a comment. Where in the world are you watching from? And what time is it right now? Are you riding this mystery wave late at night, or catching it first thing in the morning? Either way, stay with us. The next case gets even stranger. Rillia Wilson, 4'6". In theory, she was protected. Rillia Wilson was a child of the system, a ward of the state of Florida, placed in the care of a state-approved guardian, monitored by state-appointed caseworkers, and tracked by a network of agencies supposedly built to protect kids like her from slipping through the cracks. That's the theory. But sometime in early 2001, maybe January, maybe February, Rillia disappeared, and nobody noticed. Not her caseworker, not her guardian, not the Department of Children and Families. For over 15 months, this little girl was missing, and nobody from the system even realized she was gone. By the time anyone asked the question, "Where is Rillia?" she had already been missing for more than a year. What followed wasn't just one of Florida's most devastating child disappearance cases. It was a public unraveling of the very infrastructure meant to prevent tragedies like this. Rillia Wilson didn't just vanish. She exposed a bureaucratic black hole so deep it swallowed an entire agency's credibility. Let's go back. Rillia's early life was chaotic. She was born to a mother battling addiction and was placed into foster care shortly after birth. The state gave custody to a woman named Geraldine Graham, a caretaker with no formal adoption status but a strong presence in the foster community. She was supposed to check in regularly with caseworkers, provide updates, attend home visits. But something went wrong, very wrong. In April 2002, a new caseworker was assigned to Rillia's file. She arrived at Graham's Miami home to conduct a routine wellness check. Graham told her something unexpected. Rillia wasn't there. In fact, she hadn't been there for over a year. She claimed someone from DCF had taken Rilia for evaluation purposes in early 2001 and had never brought her back. The caseworker was stunned. She checked the files, called supervisors, and what she discovered would ignite a statewide scandal. No one had seen or documented contact with Rilia Wilson in over 15 months. For more than a year, her files sat untouched, unflagged, unexamined. All the while, Rilia had quietly disappeared into nothing. When the story hit the press, it detonated. A missing foster child, a year-long bureaucratic blind spot. Officials had falsified visit records. Supervisors failed to question gaps. A system designed to protect the most vulnerable had essentially erased her with a few strokes of a pen. Governor Jeb Bush called it a tragedy. Lawmakers launched investigations. The head of DCF resigned. People demanded answers. But the one person who could answer, Geraldine Graham, only raised more red flags. Graham's story unraveled quickly. Her timeline shifted. She contradicted herself. She failed a polygraph. And then, in a surreal twist, she claimed that imaginary government agents might have taken Rilia. Her explanations slipped from confusing to bizarre. Soon, investigators weren't just dealing with a missing persons case. They were navigating a maze of deception, misdirection, and cover-ups. In 2005, Geraldine Graham was indicted not for Rilia's disappearance, but for fraud. She had continued collecting state payments for Rilia's care long after the girl had vanished. The money trail proved what her words couldn't. She knew Rilia was gone and kept pretending otherwise. But without a body, without physical evidence, prosecutors couldn't press murder charges until nearly a decade later. In 2011, a former cellmate of Graham's came forward. She claimed that during their time together, Graham had confessed to killing Rilia. Not by accident, not in a moment of rage, but as punishment. The confession was detailed, chilling, and finally enough to bring a formal charge. The trial began in 2012. By now, more than a decade had passed since Rilia's last verified sighting. The prosecution had no body, no weapon, no DNA. Just the testimony of a jailhouse informant, the fraud evidence, and a mountain of suspicion. It was enough. In 2013, Geraldine Graham was convicted of kidnapping and child abuse. The jury couldn't reach a unanimous verdict on the murder charge, so she wasn't convicted of that. But she received a life sentence nonetheless. Still, the damage had already been done. Rilia Wilson became a symbol not just of a lost child, but of a lost system. Her name inspired legislative reforms in Florida's foster care oversight. Rilia's law was passed to require more accountability and face-to-face visits with foster children. She became the child who disappeared inside the very system meant to save her. To this day, no one knows exactly what happened to her. No remains have been found. No physical evidence has ever been recovered. Just a space in time where a little girl vanished without a trace while her file sat in a drawer collecting dust and unchecked boxes. She would be in her late 20s now, maybe with a job, maybe with a family. Instead, Rilia is a permanent question mark in Florida's record books, a cautionary tale etched in paperwork and silence. And if that silence feels haunting, it only deepens as we head north to Pensacola, where in 2013, a young woman named Tiffany Daniels walked out of her house barefoot and vanished into the warm dusk without a single witness. Tiffany Daniels, 25. The 12th of August, 2013. Pensacola, Florida. The Gulf breeze was thick with salt and heat as Tiffany Daniels clocked out from her job at Pensacola State College around 4:45 p.m. She was a theater technician, quirky, artistic, independent to a fault. She loved costumes, colors, bicycles, and barefoot walks on the beach. She had plans to grab dinner with a friend that night, plans she never kept. Instead, she drove home, spoke briefly with her roommate, then got into her silver Toyota 4Runner and drove away. What happened next is still wrapped in fog and sand, a mystery that has kept Florida investigators and Tiffany's loved ones searching across 2 countries and 2 realities, one where she chose to leave, and one where something, or someone, took her. Tiffany was 25, known for her eclectic style, long blonde hair, and a bohemian spirit. She was deeply rooted in Pensacola. She lived in a house not far from the beach, worked backstage at the college theater, and painted murals in her spare time. Her circle of friends described her as gentle but energetic, equal parts daydreamer and pragmatist. She was close to her family, spontaneous, yes, but not reckless, not someone who just vanished without reason. But on that Monday evening, she drove west from her home and was never seen again. Her car was discovered 2 days later, parked in a lot near Fort Pickens, an old Civil War-era fort on the Gulf Island's national seashore. The spot was secluded but not remote. Tourists parked there often. Her bicycle was missing from the back. Inside the car, her cell phone, purse, and various personal items unlocked and undisturbed. The engine still had gas. The driver's seat had been pushed back farther than Tiffany typically kept it. Her family immediately knew this wasn't right. What made things worse was the timing. Tiffany had just found out that her roommate's girlfriend was moving in. She told friends she was feeling the squeeze, wanted a little breathing room, maybe even a break. She'd also recently helped care for her father, who'd suffered a heart attack. The combination had taken an emotional toll. So when she vanished, there was initial speculation. Maybe she needed space, a reset. Maybe she walked away from her life. But that theory didn't sit well, not with her family, not with her friends, and especially not after the investigation began digging. Security footage from toll booths captured Tiffany's car heading toward Santa Rosa Island that evening around 7:51 p.m. alone, or at least no passenger was visible. That's the last confirmed sighting. After that, nothing. No phone activity. No financial transactions, no social media posts, no messages to friends or family. Her car just sat, quietly baking in the sun, until a park ranger noticed it 2 days later. The search kicked off quickly. Helicopters scanned the dunes, foot patrols swept the area, dogs followed scent trails, which led nowhere definitive. But there were no signs of foul play, no broken glass, no signs of a struggle, no blood. No Tiffany. Then came the theories. Some believed she had gone for a walk on the beach and drowned, but the tides would have given something back. Clothes, shoes, a body. Nothing ever surfaced. Others pointed to human trafficking. It's a grim possibility, especially along the I-10 corridor, where several trafficking rings had been dismantled in the years prior. But again, no evidence. No witness reports. No one saw Tiffany talking to strangers. No one saw her leaving the car. Then there were the sightings. People claimed to see her in New Orleans. A waitress swore a woman, matching Tiffany's description, had come into her restaurant, disoriented, barefoot, and alone. A store owner in Texas thought she recognized her from the flyers. Even a tipster from Mexico claimed to have seen her crossing into Baja. Tiffany's family chased them all, especially her father, Rodney Daniels. He became a tireless force in the search, posting flyers in English and Spanish, tracking every lead, calling every station that aired her story. His love became a searchlight, scanning through a night that never seemed to end. But over the years, the noise faded, the sightings stopped, the coverage dwindled, and the car, the parking lot, the coastal wind, those were the only constants. Every few months, the story resurfaces. A podcast, a blog post, a Reddit thread. Each time, the same question. What happened to Tiffany Daniels? To this day, there is no definitive answer. She would be 37 now, maybe living abroad, maybe gone, maybe a ghost walking the white sands of Fort Pickens, barefoot, forever 5 steps out of sight. And, as unsettling as Tiffany's case is, The next one takes us deeper into the same coastal air, just 12 years earlier, in the same Pensacola area, where a teenager named Danielle Bell disappeared after a party. A night of music, friends, and laughter. A night that ended with a silence no one has yet broken. Danielle Bell, 14. The 30th of September, 2001. Cantonment, Florida, a quiet, semi-rural stretch just north of Pensacola. It's one of those towns where the high school football team is the biggest event of the week, where neighborhoods dissolve into thick woods and gravel roads. It's the kind of place where nothing happens, until it does. That night, 4-year-old Danielle Bell went to a party. Not a rave, not a wild scene, just a neighborhood get-together with teenagers, some adults, and the usual late summer buzz. She was a freshman at Tate High School, brown hair, braces, quick with a laugh. She'd recently started dating a boy, had friends, teachers liked her. She wasn't wild, but she was curious. Testing limits, like most teens. She told her stepdad she was heading to a friend's house, but she didn't come home. By morning, her family was in full panic. They called friends, drove neighborhood streets, hit every party house they could think of, but no one seemed to know where she'd gone, or they weren't saying. When Danielle was officially reported missing, the search began quickly. Escambia County investigators canvassed the area. Flyers were posted. Her face, young, sweet, slightly unsure, started showing up on telephone poles and gas station windows. But from the start, there was tension, whispers, rumors, and a growing sense that the people who were with her that night weren't telling the full story. According to early reports, Danielle had been seen at the party with multiple people, including a man in his 22nd who had a history with younger girls. She'd reportedly been drinking. There was talk of a fight, talk of her leaving with someone, talk of a car. No two stories matched. But the name that kept coming up was William Bill Hearn, a man almost twice her age who had known Danielle before the party. He was eventually arrested on unrelated charges involving other minors. Investigators believed he may have had contact with Danielle the night she vanished. Some accounts even placed him at the party. But there was a problem. No one could prove what happened next. Hearn denied any involvement. He gave inconsistent statements. He was convicted later on charges of unlawful sexual activity with other minors, but in terms of Danielle's disappearance, nothing stuck. No confession, no evidence, just a shadow that kept falling over the case every time it was reopened. As the months turned into years, Danielle's story slipped out of headlines but never out of memory, especially not for her family. Her mother, Linda Bell, became a one-woman search team. She organized awareness events, kept the flyers circulating, spoke with the media whenever possible. She refused to let Danielle become a file gathering dust in a sheriff's department drawer. And then quiet. No remains, no verified sightings, no forensic evidence, but not total silence. In 2012, over a decade after Danielle vanished, law enforcement stated publicly that they believed foul play had been involved from the very beginning. They also suggested that people in the community, possibly even attendees at the party, still had information they hadn't come forward with. The tone shifted from open investigation to a plea for closure. There were hints. Danielle's name appeared on multiple online message boards, true crime forums, and local whisper networks. Someone claimed she'd been buried in a specific wooded area. A search was conducted. Nothing found. Another claimed she had been moved out of state. Still nothing. Every lead generated more speculation and heartbreak, but no answers. And the timeline remains brutal. Danielle was only 14. She didn't have a driver's license, no bank accounts, no way to support herself. If she left willingly, it wouldn't have lasted. And if she didn't, then someone out there knows exactly what happened. Investigators continue to believe the truth lies close to home, that someone who was at that party knows, that a few key sentences, never spoken, could unlock everything. As of today, Danielle Bell is still officially missing. Her case is active, but cold. Her name appears in missing persons databases alongside adults and children, famous and forgotten, as one of the many Floridians who stepped into the night and never came back. She would be in her late 32nd now, maybe a teacher, maybe a parent, maybe just someone who still smiled with that same braces-tightened grin from her school photo. But instead, she's a question, a presence that still lingers in Escambia County like a half-remembered dream, just out of reach. And as we shift from teen disappearances to childhood innocence shattered, we arrive in Port Salerno in 1993, where 10-year-old Andrea Gale Parsons walked out of her house and into the unknown, sparking a decades-long search filled with confessions, contradictions, and a body still missing. Andrea Gale Parsons, 10. The 11th of July, 1993, Port Salerno, Florida. It was a warm Sunday evening, the kind where the humidity sticks to your skin like syrup and the sky turns soft and pink just before dark. Andrea Gale Parsons, a bright, shy 10-year-old with glasses and shoulder-length brown hair, asked her family if she could walk to a nearby convenience store. It wasn't far, just a few blocks down the road, in this tight-knit coastal town south of Stuart. She'd done it before. She was polite, trustworthy, careful. She left the house around 6 p.m. She never came back. And what followed was a 3-decade-long mystery that would twist and turn through false leads, media frenzies, and courtroom drama, only to end with the unthinkable. A confession, but no body. Andrea lived with her mother and stepfather in a small house in a working-class neighborhood. She was a good student, soft-spoken, with a circle of friends that included other kids from the area. She didn't run off, didn't act out. She was 10 but carried herself with a quiet sense of responsibility. That's what made her disappearance all the more alarming. When she didn't return that night, panic settled in fast. Her parents called the Martin County Sheriff's Office within hours. Deputies showed up. Flashlights swept through backyards. Helicopters buzzed overhead. Neighbors gathered, whispering their own theories, hoping it was a simple misunderstanding. But by morning, it was clear. Andrea was missing. The search grew massive. Volunteers combed through the mangroves, the ditches, the alleyways that zigzagged through Port Salerno. Dogs were brought in. Flyers were printed. A media campaign went statewide. In the early days, hope still glimmered. Maybe she'd wandered off. Maybe she'd gotten lost. Maybe. Then the theories started. One man, Adam Joel Briley, became a person of interest early on. He was known to Andrea's family and had a criminal record. Investigators suspected he might have seen Andrea the night she vanished. But nothing concrete ever connected him. No evidence, no confession, just shadows and hunches. By the end of the first week, the case was already beginning to stall. Leads came and went, tips from across the state, rumors she'd been seen with strangers, that she'd been taken to Miami, or Georgia, or across state lines, but each tip ended in silence. The case grew cold. And like so many missing child cases in the pre-digital era, it lived quietly in a drawer, resuscitated every few years by a television segment or anniversary vigil, until 20111, 8 years after Andrea vanished. That's when a man named Donnie Romine was arrested on unrelated charges and decided to talk. He told police that his former roommate, Curtis Wayne Rogers, had confessed to killing Andrea years earlier. Rogers, who was already serving time in federal prison, was brought in for questioning. And this time he talked. His story was fragmented, disturbing, and self-serving. He claimed that Andrea had been at their house that night in 1993, that she'd come over, that something went wrong. He didn't elaborate much, didn't give a clear motive, but he did say one thing. She died in that house, and he helped dispose of her body. He even led police to a supposed burial site, a patch of overgrown land off a rural road in the county. Crews dug, searched, found bones, But not Andrea's. The remains turned out to be from animals, not human. Another dead end in a case that had already run out of road a dozen times before. Still, Rogers's confession, backed by some circumstantial evidence and testimony from Romine, was enough to charge him. In 2015, more than 20 years after Andrea disappeared, Curtis Wayne Rogers pleaded no contest to second-degree murder and kidnapping. As part of the deal, he avoided the death penalty and was sentenced to life in prison. But the plea didn't bring closure, because to this day, Andrea's body has never been found. Her remains, if buried as Rogers claimed, were never recovered. He never revealed the full truth, never said what happened in those final moments. His version of the story remained vague, slippery, half-spoken, like he was confessing just enough to cut a deal, but not enough to make peace. Andrea Parsons remains officially missing. There's a conviction, a name in the prison roster, a plea agreement filed in court, but no grave, no headstone, no place for her family to leave flowers. Just memories of a soft-voiced little girl who walked down the road on a summer night and never came back. Today, her picture still appears in missing children databases, a shy smile behind thick glasses, the kind of face you'd remember if you saw it in a crowd. But she's not in a crowd, not in a home, not in a classroom. She's part of Florida's endless whisper, its long corridor of lost girls. And decades earlier, in the same city of Miami, another girl, Amy Billig, walked out her front door for a ride and stepped into a disappearance that would stretch across continents, phone calls, and decades of haunting silence. Amy Billig, 17. The 5th of March, 1974. Coconut Grove, Miami. The kind of day where the sun lingers lazily over the sidewalk and teenagers, like Amy Billig, take advantage of the freedom between lunch and dusk. She had just come home from school. Her plan was simple: hitch a quick ride to meet her father at his art gallery a few miles away. A routine trip in a time when hitchhiking, though risky, wasn't taboo. She threw on her jeans, a simple top, and slipped out the front door of her family's home with her camera slung over one shoulder. She was 17. Bright, artistic, gentle, and fiercely loved. She was never seen again. Amy's disappearance is one of those cases that starts with a sudden blink and stretches into a nightmare so long and winding it feels like fiction. But it wasn't fiction for Susan and Ned Billig, her parents. It was real, and they would spend the next 3 decades locked in a war against dead ends, hoaxes, heartbreak, and that unbearable limbo between hope and finality. When Amy didn't arrive at the gallery, her father called home. Her mother hadn't heard from her either. Alarm bells rang immediately. There was no cooling off period. No assumption that she had just run off. Her parents knew better. She wasn't a runaway. She wasn't impulsive. She didn't disappear without a word. Susan Billig filed a missing persons report that afternoon. The initial search was thorough. Police interviewed friends, classmates, neighbors. They canvassed the streets, checked hospitals, checked the morgue. Nothing. She'd vanished into a hot Miami afternoon and left behind nothing but questions. But the story didn't fade. Not this time. Instead, it mutated into one of the most bewildering and gut-wrenching missing persons investigations in Florida history. Within days of her disappearance, a bizarre theory emerged: that Amy had been abducted by members of a motorcycle gang. At the time, outlaw biker culture was at its height. Witnesses claimed to have seen Amy with a group of bikers near US Route 1. Others said she was at a gas station, looking confused. A waitress claimed she served her lunch. The Billigs chased every lead. They drove up and down the coast, talking to biker gangs from Miami to the Midwest. Many were sympathetic. A few even offered information. Some said she was alive, being moved from place to place. Others said she'd been claimed by a member and was too afraid to return. It was impossible to know what was real and what was bravado, what was the truth, and what was the invention of people who thrived on myth and power. But Susan didn't stop. For years, she followed rumors, tips, and messages scrawled on bathroom walls. She visited biker bars and junkyards. She received postcards postmarked from across the country. Every time the phone rang, she held her breath, and for good reason. Because then, the calls began. From a man who never gave a name. He said he had Amy, or knew who did. He described things only someone close to the case might know: what she wore, what she looked like, the sound of her voice. He tormented Susan with details, claimed Amy had been trafficked, that she was suffering, that he was her captor. He called for years. Sometimes weeks would pass, sometimes months, but then he'd be back. His voice cold, emotionless, calm, always calm. He never asked for ransom, never revealed a location. Just pain, just terror. Susan, ever the mother warrior, tried to track him, worked with police, even recorded the calls. Forensic linguists and investigators attempted to analyze the voice, but the trail always went cold. The man was never identified. His motives, cruel, obsessive, maybe even delusional, remained a dark mystery within a mystery. Years passed. In 1995, a breakthrough seemed possible. Paul Branch, a former biker gang enforcer, confessed on his deathbed that Amy had, in fact, been taken by members of his gang in 1974. He said she'd been held against her will for weeks, possibly months, before she was killed and her body disposed of in the Everglades. It was a devastating revelation, one the Billigs had both feared and expected. But the confession came without physical proof. No body, no evidence, no confirmation. Just the final whisper of a man dying of cancer, trying to unburden himself at the last moment. Still, law enforcement believed he was telling the truth. Amy Billig was legally declared dead, but Susan never fully gave up. Not even after hearing the worst. She continued searching, writing, speaking, hoping. She died in 2005. Her husband, Ned, passed away years before. Neither lived to see a resolution, only the fading hope that their daughter's story might someday help someone else's child make it home. Amy's case lives on in books, documentaries, and cold case archives. Her photo, forever 17, still surfaces on missing persons registries. Her disappearance is more than a headline. It's a haunting reminder of how one decision, one ride, one stranger, can send a life spiraling into the unknown. And in that same year, 1974, Florida bore witness to another dual disappearance, this time of two sisters in Jacksonville, Lillian Annette Anderson and her older sister Mylette. They vanished from their home on a humid summer evening, and just like Amy, left behind a trail of silence that has never been filled. Lillian Annette Anderson, 11, and Mylette Anderson, 17. The 1st of August, 1974, Jacksonville, Florida. Summer heat rising off the pavement in waves. The kind of sticky evening where cicadas buzz louder than the television and screen doors creak with every movement. Inside a modest brick home on 15th Street, the Anderson sisters Lillian, known to her family as Annette, age 11, and her big sister Mylette, age 17, were left home alone for just a few hours. Their parents, Jack and Louise Anderson, had gone out for the evening, a short drive away, a normal errand, nothing unusual. The girls were left with strict instructions. Stay inside. Keep the doors locked. Don't answer for anyone they didn't know. When their parents returned home around 11 p.m., the lights were still on. The television was still playing. The front door? Unlocked. But the girls? Gone. No screams. No signs of forced entry. No chaos. The house was eerily still, like someone had pressed pause on a moment and then stepped away. That night marked the beginning of one of Florida's most enduring unsolved mysteries, the vanishing of the Anderson sisters. Annette had just finished elementary school. Mylette was preparing for her senior year. They were close in that sibling way that blends friendship with friction. Mylette was protective, more mature, already thinking about college and part-time jobs. Annette was still a kid, shy, sweet, obsessed with school and storybooks. Together, they made sense. Together was the only way anyone ever saw them. And that night, they disappeared as a pair. The Jacksonville Sheriff's Office arrived quickly. A missing child case, especially two, and especially sisters, was a serious alarm bell. Within hours, local authorities were searching the neighborhood, questioning neighbors, calling friends, hoping for something, a sighting, a noise, a car pulling away. But there was nothing. The search widened. Helicopters, canine units, rivers, woods, local television and newspapers picked up the story fast. By the end of the week, their names and faces were broadcast across the state. But as quickly as the media attention rose, the evidence plateaued. There were no witnesses, no ransom notes, no motive. The girls didn't run away, none of their clothes were missing. Their purses were untouched. They didn't take money. They didn't leave a message. They just weren't there. The theories began to swirl almost immediately. Some believed the girls had opened the door to someone they trusted, a family friend, a neighbor. Others thought it might have been a stranger, a predator who watched the house, waited for the right moment. Jacksonville in the 1972nd was sprawling and uneven. Urban and suburban edges bumped up against each other, and crime, especially against children, was not unheard of. But nothing stuck. Weeks passed, then months. Every lead seemed to collapse. A girl seen boarding a bus in Georgia wasn't Annette. A reported sighting in Tallahassee turned out to be a case of mistaken identity. And through it all, the Anderson family waited, grieved, hoped. But most of all, they questioned what went wrong in those hours between sunset and midnight. The most disturbing part? They weren't alone. Just 3 weeks later, in the same city, another young girl, Jean-Marie Schoen, age 9, would also disappear. Walking to a neighborhood store in broad daylight, gone, no trace. 3 girls, all under 18, vanishing from the same city in the span of one summer. It was enough to spark whispers of a serial predator, a pattern, a threat no one had seen coming. And yet nothing tied them together. No forensic evidence, no common suspect, just proximity and timing. In 2005, 3 decades after their disappearance, the Anderson sisters were briefly linked to an alleged serial killer already imprisoned out of state. Investigators considered whether he might have been in Florida at the time, but that lead, like all the others, faded without confirmation. Still, the Anderson family never gave up. Every birthday passed without candles. Every Christmas came and went with 2 empty chairs. The family kept their photos in sight, their memory alive. The community held vigils. Journalists revisited the case every few years on anniversaries, or when another Florida child went missing, and someone would say, "Remember the Anderson sisters?" By now, Annette would be in her 62nd, Mylette in her 72nd. Grown women who never had the chance to grow, never graduated, never left home, never walked back through the door they left open that summer night. The Anderson case remains open, technically active, realistically cold. It sits among the oldest child disappearance cases in Florida, etched into the city's history, not as a solved crime, but as a lasting, gnawing absence. And while that summer was already heavy with grief, it wasn't finished. Just weeks later, in that same Jacksonville heat, another girl, 9-year-old Jean-Marie Schoen, would vanish while walking to a store. A final piece in a trio of disappearances that would haunt the city for decades. Jean-Marie Schoen, 9. The 21st of July, 1974. Jacksonville, Florida. A sweltering Sunday afternoon in a neighborhood called Arlington, a suburb on the eastern edge of the city. 9-year-old Jean-Marie Schoen was walking a familiar route, something she'd done many times before. She was headed to the nearby Little Star Market, just a few blocks from her home on Rogero Road. She had $1 in her pocket and a plan in her head. Get a soda, maybe a candy bar. Be back in 10 minutes. 15 tops. She never came back. And in that moment, Jacksonville, already simmering with fear from the recent disappearances of the Anderson sisters just weeks earlier, was cracked wide open. Jean-Marie, like Annette and Mylette Anderson, was young, innocent, and local. She lived with her mother, stepfather, and siblings. She was sweet, smart, and careful. The kind of kid who didn't wander, who didn't go off course. She was wearing a white top, red shorts, and sandals when she left that day. She carried no purse. She didn't need one. She wasn't going far. What should have been a short, safe trip turned into a void. When Jean-Marie didn't return within the hour, her family knew something was wrong. Her stepfather began driving the route. Her mother called neighbors. By sunset, police were on the scene. Flyers were printed. Search teams were assembled. But this time, the city was already on edge because Jean-Marie wasn't the first girl to vanish from Jacksonville that summer. She was the third. 3 girls, less than a month apart, all within a 10-mile radius, all vanishing into thin air. The public reaction was immediate and visceral. This wasn't just one mystery, it was a pattern, a shadow hanging over the city. News outlets ran the story nonstop. Parents stopped letting their kids play outside. Store owners taped flyers to windows. The police set up a hotline and assigned extra investigators. Everyone was looking for Jean-Marie. And then came the tip. A local man reported seeing a girl matching Jean-Marie's description getting into a blue car, possibly a Ford, near the market that day. Another witness said they saw a man talking to a girl by the store's entrance, but couldn't recall details. The composite sketch that emerged was vague. White male, mid-32nd, dark hair. The kind of face that could belong to 1,000 people in Jacksonville at the time. Police tracked down dozens of blue cars, questioned ex-cons, checked with parole officers, but no suspect ever stuck, and Jean-Marie remained missing. Unlike many child disappearances, this one had no direct suspect, no close relative with a record, no disgruntled neighbor, no bitter custody battle. It felt random, fast, cold. And that randomness made it even more terrifying. The Schoen family held on to hope. Jean's mother, Ruth, became a constant presence at the sheriff's department. She called in every tip, asked every question. She went on television, pleaded in newspapers, knocked on doors, but nothing came back. No calls, no letters, no ransom. Just the loud, aching silence that surrounds a child-size hole in a family. In the decades that followed, theories drifted in and out like Florida storms. Some investigators believed a serial predator had passed through Jacksonville that summer, targeting young girls in moments of vulnerability. Others suspected someone local, someone who knew the area and could move without being noticed. More than one retired officer believed the disappearances of Jean-Marie, Annette, and Mylette were connected. But with no forensic evidence, no DNA, and no confirmed sightings, the theories stayed exactly that. In the early 2002, as technology advanced, the case was briefly reopened with renewed interest. Detectives looked again at the original files, re-examined the witness sketches, even dug into cold cases across state lines. But no new information emerged. Jean-Marie's name remains on the National Missing Children's Registry. Her age-progressed photo sits beside her elementary school portrait, bridging the decades with guesswork and sadness. She would be 59 today, a grown woman, possibly a mother, possibly a grandmother. But instead, she's remembered as the 9-year-old who left for a soda on a Sunday and vanished into Florida's humid air. Her family eventually moved away, but they never stopped remembering. Her name still appears in local news retrospectives. Every few years, the old headlines resurface. 3 girls missing from Jacksonville, summer of 2074. No arrests were ever made. No bodies recovered. Just 3 girls lost in a span of 3 weeks. And a city that still flinches at the memory. And while Jean-Marie's disappearance may have marked the end of that grim Jacksonville summer, mysteries didn't stop coming. In 2006, hundreds of miles south in Malabar, a firefighter named Brandy Lynn Hall vanished after her shift and left behind a truck, a pond, and a trail that went cold almost instantly. Brandy Lynn Hall, 32. The 17th of August, 2006, Malabar, Florida, a tiny town in Brevard County where pine forests stretch in every direction and pickup trucks dot the driveways like clockwork. It was supposed to be a quiet night, just another Thursday, but that evening, 2-year-old Brandy Lynn Hall left her job at the Malabar Volunteer Fire Department for the last time. She was never seen again. Her truck, a green Chevy pickup, was discovered the next morning, submerged in a nearby retention pond off Treeland Boulevard. The driver's side window was down. The keys were still in the ignition. Her purse, badge, and gear bag were missing. And Brandy had simply vanished. To say her disappearance raised eyebrows is an understatement. Brandy wasn't just any firefighter. She was one of the first female volunteers in the department's history, known for her strength, sharp sense of humor, and no-nonsense approach to life. She was a wife, a mother, and a woman trying to build a future after a rough patch. A patch that included her husband's legal trouble and her own resignation from a paid firefighting position in Palm Bay just a few months earlier. There was tension in her life, no denying that, but nothing that suggested she'd disappear into thin air. So when her waterlogged truck was pulled from the pond that Friday morning, people started asking questions. The location of the truck was strange, not along her usual route, not near her home. There were no tire marks, no signs of a crash. The truck appeared to have been placed there deliberately, as if someone wanted it found or wanted to send a message. Investigators zeroed in quickly. Brandy's husband, Jeff Hall, was facing serious charges at the time, allegations tied to marijuana cultivation. The timing was tight. Just days before she vanished, Brandy had testified in court. Was she afraid of retaliation? Did she have second thoughts? Did someone want her silence? But Jeff insisted he had nothing to do with it. He cooperated with investigators, maintained his innocence, and the police, while skeptical, never charged him with anything related to her disappearance. Then came the rumors. Some believed Brandy had staged her own vanishing act to escape the pressure. Maybe she'd gone off the grid Mexico, Canada, the Caribbean. She had fire and medical training. She knew how to survive. Others thought the opposite, that she'd been silenced by someone with too much to lose if she talked. But here's the part that makes this case so unnerving. Nothing ever came back. Not a body, not a credit card charge, not a passport record, not a confirmed sighting, just a submerged truck and a growing silence. The case remains open. Every year or so, it resurfaces in Florida media. Her photo, shoulder-length blonde hair, confident eyes, a trace of a smile shows up again, haunting the timeline of missing women in the state. Her children grew up without answers. Her family still waits. Brandy Hall is gone. But the mystery she left behind continues to ripple, like the surface of that pond the morning they pulled her truck from the water. And not far from Malabar, just a few counties over on the Gulf Coast, another woman, Kelly Lynn Rothwell, would vanish 5 years later under equally suspicious circumstances. Her last known sighting? Walking out of a Chili's restaurant and straight into the void. Kelly Lynn Rothwell, 35. The 12th of March, 2011. Indian Rocks Beach, Florida. A breezy Saturday on the Gulf Coast. Spring break tourists in board shorts. Locals grabbing lunch. And at a Chili's restaurant just off Gulf Boulevard, 5-year-old Kelly Lynn Rothwell met her friends for lunch. She smiled. She laughed. She paid the bill. Then she walked outside and was never seen again. What happened between the Chili's parking lot and wherever she was supposed to go next remains one of Florida's most frustrating modern cold cases. Kelly was a police cadet, a few weeks shy of graduating from the police academy. She was in the best shape of her life, focused, thriving. She had recently made the difficult decision to leave her live-in boyfriend, David Perry, a brooding, physically imposing man with a documented temper and a controlling streak. Friends say the relationship had grown toxic. She'd finally had enough. That afternoon, after lunch, Kelly told her friends she was going home to end it. Face to face. That was the last time anyone saw her. Later that day, when police visited the apartment the couple shared, Kelly wasn't there, but something was off. The condo was unusually clean, bleached, in fact. Her car was parked outside. But there was no sign of her. No clothes missing. No wallet. Just silence. And David Perry? Gone. By the time police started asking questions, he was already halfway to Elmira, New York, his hometown. He left the state that same day, within hours of Kelly's disappearance. Investigators questioned him. He offered no help, refused to cooperate, lawyered up. And then it got worse. A few months later, he was arrested in New York on unrelated charges of fraud, disability theft, and impersonating an officer. Not only was he refusing to talk about Kelly, he was actively committing other crimes. But despite the suspicions, he was never charged with anything related to her disappearance. The circumstantial evidence stacked high. He had motive, opportunity, a history of violence, but without a body or direct proof, the case hit a wall. Kelly's family never stopped searching. Her mother, sisters, and friends flooded media outlets. Her face appeared on billboards, news segments, and in articles across Florida and New York. But no credible sighting, no new leads, and no forensic break ever came. In 2017, David Perry was sentenced to prison on the fraud charges. Still, he never cracked, never confessed, never offered a clue about what happened to Kelly. He remains a free man when it comes to her case, a person of interest, but nothing more. Kelly Rothwell was declared legally dead in 2017. She would be in her late 42nd now, maybe rising through the ranks as an officer, maybe mentoring other women looking to wear the badge. Instead, she's another Florida name whispered in the halls of unsolved crimes, her final steps forever shrouded in suspicion. And on the other side of the state, just a few years later, 2 4-year-old boys, Austin Stephanos and Perry Cohen, would take a small fishing boat out into the Atlantic and never return, triggering one of the largest ocean searches in Florida history. Austin Stephanos and Perry Cohen, 14. The 24th of July, 2015. Jupiter, Florida. The Atlantic shimmered under a cloudless sky. It was a picture-perfect summer day, the kind you'd see in a tourism brochure. And for 2 teenage boys, Austin Stephanos and Perry Cohen, it was the perfect day for fishing. Both 14 years old, both raised on boats, confident, skilled. Local legends among their peers for their ease on the water. They launched their 19-foot single-engine Seacraft from the Jupiter Inlet just after 11 a.m., planning to fish near shore and return by afternoon. They never did. By sunset, panic set in, families called friends, marina staff double-checked slips. The Coast Guard was alerted. What followed was one of the largest maritime searches in Florida's recent history, covering over 50,000 nautical miles from the Bahamas to Charleston. Airplanes, helicopters, ships, civilian volunteers, even satellite data was used. But no boys. The boat was eventually found adrift, 180 miles north, off the coast of Bermuda, empty, damaged, the engine cover gone. Austin's iPhone was still on board, but waterlogged beyond repair. Perry's tackle box floated nearby, but there were no life vests, no emergency radio, no EPIRB, emergency position, indicating radio beacon, nothing that could help answer the only question that mattered. What happened? Speculation ran wild. A sudden storm, a rogue wave, a mechanical failure. Some believed the boys had tried to push farther offshore. Others wondered if they were chasing fish and lost track of time. The phone data was recovered years later, but it offered no smoking gun. Just photos, some texts, nothing that explained their fate. The story became national news. Celebrities offered rewards. Social media lit up. But it wasn't just about two boys. It was about how easily a sunny Florida day could turn into a tragedy no one could undo. Their families responded differently. Perry's family advocated for stricter boating laws for minors. Austin's family set up a foundation promoting water safety. But the pain never left either household. To this day, neither Austin nor Perry has ever been found. No remains, no confirmed sightings, just a sun-bleached hull drifting alone in the vast blue. And if the ocean took them, it left nothing behind but grief and questions that echo across Florida's missing persons history, where even the youngest aren't spared. Like Sophie Reeder, a 15-year-old girl from Fort Lauderdale who walked out her front door in 2017 and into the shadows of a mystery that still hasn't let go. Sophie, Elizabeth Reeder, 15. May 19, 2017, Fort Lauderdale, Florida. A warm Friday night, the kind that lingers with heat long after sunset. 15-year-old Sophie Reeder stepped out of her home just before midnight. No note, no bags, no clear destination. Just a teenager in shorts and a hoodie, slipping into the night like she was just running an errand. She was never seen again. To this day, no one knows why she left. Her father was home. Her bedroom light was still on. She hadn't taken anything with her. No purse, no phone charger, not even a change of clothes. Just the clothes on her back and a phone with dwindling battery life. It would be easy to write it off as teenage rebellion, but that theory crumbles the second you look closer. Sophie was a sophomore in high school. Artistic, bright, stubborn. She liked music and makeup, and had dreams of being a singer. But beneath the surface, there were signs of turbulence. She had recently been suspended from school, was known to stay out late. There were rumors of risky behavior, and perhaps most troubling evidence that she had been chatting online with older men. In the days before she vanished, Sophie had been using dating apps, social media platforms, and encrypted messaging services. Police found messages that suggested she may have been lured or groomed by someone much older, someone who knew exactly what to say, someone who knew how to disappear. Surveillance footage would later capture Sophie walking alone through the city that night, heading toward the west side of Fort Lauderdale. At one point, she was seen near a known area for trafficking and street-level crime. She looked disoriented, tired, maybe scared, but she was alone, and then, nothing. No footage of her returning, no confirmed sightings, no calls to friends or family. Her phone last pinged in the early morning hours, somewhere near the northwest corner of the city. After that, it went dark. Her family, especially her father, Michael Reeder, was shattered. He plastered her face across the city, hired private investigators, worked with law enforcement, did everything right. But nothing came back. Not a single credible lead. From the beginning, authorities suspected human trafficking. Fort Lauderdale is a known hotspot, a crossroads of international transit, vulnerable populations, and predatory networks. Sophie fit the profile, a teenage girl in crisis, alone at night, drawn into conversations she may not have fully understood. But if she was taken, where did she go? Why has no one come forward? No one slipped up? The investigation remains active, though painfully cold. No arrests, no suspects named. Sophie's case still haunts Florida's databases, her face frozen in time at age 15, a smile full of youth, eyes that seem to ask for something you can't quite give. And just 5 years earlier, on the other coast in Petersburg, another teenage girl, Morgan Kiana Martin, stepped outside her house late one night while pregnant and vanished into the same kind of silence. Morgan Kiana Martin, 17. The 25th of July, 2012. Street, Petersburg, Florida. Just after midnight. 17-year-old Morgan Martin, pregnant and in her third trimester, stepped outside her home to meet someone. That's all anyone knows for certain. She told her family she'd be right back. She left in her slippers, phone in hand, wearing a white tank top and gray pajama pants. She never returned. The street was quiet. Her mother was inside. Her siblings asleep. No loud noises. No witnesses. Just 1 minute, she was there, and the next, she was gone. Morgan was weeks away from giving birth to her first child. She had plans, baby names picked out. She'd been texting regularly with the father of her baby, an older man whose identity she never shared publicly, but whom she claimed was involved in her life. Investigators believe that may be who she left to meet. From the beginning, the Street Petersburg police treated her disappearance as suspicious. She hadn't taken clothes or money. She hadn't made arrangements to leave. Her phone went dead hours later. It was clear to everyone this wasn't a runaway. This was something else. A search was launched immediately. The neighborhood was canvassed. Her cell records tracked, but nothing emerged. No clues, no tips that led anywhere. Just a family left spinning in grief, fear, and confusion. Then came the rumors. Some said she'd been lured away by someone she met online. Others said she'd been harmed by someone close. The theories multiplied, but evidence didn't present. And with no crime scene, no surveillance, and no physical proof of what happened after she stepped off that porch, law enforcement hit wall after wall. Over the years, the case has remained open. Periodically, new tips come in. Each one gives the family a flicker of hope, only to burn out just as quickly. Her mother, Leah Martin, has remained a constant presence in the community, organizing vigils, sharing Morgan's story, holding on to the belief that someone knows something. The most haunting detail? Morgan's daughter would be over a decade old now, a child born into a mystery she never asked for, a life that should have started with a delivery room, not a missing persons report. The case remains unsolved. The baby's father was never publicly identified. No charges have been filed. No body has been found. Just another young woman swallowed by the Florida night. And just 2 years later, in the same city of Fort Lauderdale, another mother, Trukita Scott, left work one afternoon and vanished without a trace. Trukita Jakita Scott, 24. The 25th of June, 2014, Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Trukita Scott finished her shift at work and was supposed to head straight to her kids, but she never arrived. The 4-year-old mother of two had made arrangements to pick up her children that evening. Her phone stopped ringing around 2:30 p.m. She was last seen leaving her job near Broward Boulevard and never heard from again. Trukita was reliable. She didn't miss work. She didn't miss pickups. She didn't go silent. Her disappearance was completely out of character. Her family knew something was wrong from the minute she didn't show. The search began quickly. Police interviewed coworkers, combed through surveillance footage, and pinged her phone. But nothing concrete emerged. Her car was later found, parked a few blocks from her workplace. Locked. Undisturbed. No signs of a struggle. No clues inside. Attention quickly turned toward Trukita's ex-boyfriend, a man with a known criminal record and a volatile past. There had been domestic violence in the relationship, restraining orders, court records. It was no secret that their relationship had been dangerous at times. But while suspicions mounted, hard evidence didn't piece. The ex refused to cooperate. No forensic proof tied him to the disappearance. And the deeper investigators dug, the more they realized just how little there was to go on. No eyewitnesses, no cameras catching her final steps, just absence. Her mother, Beverly Scott, became the face of the search, speaking at rallies, holding press conferences, begging for answers. But even years later, no solid lead has emerged. The case still lingers in limbo. Truquita's children are growing up without her. Her name remains etched in Florida's unsolved files. Another mother vanished in daylight. And just like that, another woman just a year later in the same city would follow a similar pattern. Young, female, vanished. Her name was Teresa Lynn Fitton. Her case, like so many before it, would begin with a walk and end with a void. Teresa Lynn Fitton, 18. August 1975, Fort Lauderdale, Florida. It was a time when people still left their doors unlocked and walked their neighborhoods without looking over their shoulders. The air was thick with summer heat and the promise of freedom. But for one 8-year-old Teresa Lynn Fitton, the Florida sun would set that August evening with no return. She was last seen walking away from her apartment complex, reportedly wearing a red shirt and jeans, and possibly pregnant, though that detail has never been confirmed. Where she was going, who she was meeting, what her plans were, none of that is clear. What is clear is this: she left without taking her purse, her ID, or any belongings, and she never came back. Teresa had moved to Fort Lauderdale recently and was trying to find her footing in adulthood. She had dreams, though most of them were still just sketches. People who knew her described her as quiet, a bit reserved, but determined. She wasn't the type to vanish voluntarily, and she had no history of mental health issues or sudden wanderings. Her family and friends were stunned when the days stretched into weeks, and there was still no sign of her. Investigators started with the usual questions. Did she leave on her own? Was she lured away by someone she trusted? Did something happen to her en route to wherever she was going? But no leads stuck. No one had seen her after that final glimpse on foot. No traffic camera, no gas station sighting, no witness came forward. And the longer the silence stretched, the louder the whispers got. Some said she'd left town with a secret boyfriend. Others claimed she'd gone into hiding because of an unexpected pregnancy. But rumors are cheap, and none of them came with evidence. The official investigation eventually stalled, and Teresa's name faded from headlines, buried under layers of more urgent stories. Her case sat dormant for years until the early 2000s, when advances in missing persons databases prompted authorities to revisit long cold files. Teresa's name came up again. Age-progressed photos were created, missing posters were reissued, her case was digitized, categorized, and re-entered into the National Missing Persons Registry. Still, no answers. Teresa Fitton remains one of Fort Lauderdale's oldest unsolved disappearances. She would be in her late 62nd today. Her face, once captured in a soft, youthful black and white photograph, has been digitally aged by software to show the woman she never got to become. And in 2012, just an hour north in Sarasota, another woman, Patricia Scala, would also leave behind her belongings, walk out into the Florida heat, and never come back. Patricia Erin Scala, 27. May 22, 2012, Sarasota, Florida. Patricia Erin Scala was seen walking down a residential street near the heart of Sarasota's suburban sprawl. It was late morning. She carried no bag. She left no message. The door to her home, by all accounts, had closed behind her with quiet finality. She hasn't been seen since. Patricia was 27, young, independent, fiercely private. Her life, like many in their late 22nd, was filled with transitions. She was between jobs. Relationships had come and gone. But she wasn't isolated. She had friends, family, a social circle. She wasn't spiraling, as far as anyone could tell. But the details of her life leading up to May 22 were complicated. She was known to take long walks. She found them calming, meditative, even. But this time, the walk didn't bring her home. Her phone was left behind, her wallet was untouched, her car sat unused. Nothing in her apartment suggested a planned departure. It was like she'd stepped outside to take a breath and was swallowed by the sky. Authorities launched a search, but with no signs of foul play, the case was treated cautiously. Friends reported her missing quickly. Flyers went up, the local media picked up the story, but leads were few and far between. Some believed she may have wandered into the nearby woods or coastal marshland. Others wondered if she had decided to start over somewhere else, fresh identity, fresh life. But again, there was no evidence of either. No ticket purchases, no social security activity, no sightings. Years passed. Her family held on to hope, but the silence became its own kind of answer. Patricia's face was entered into national missing person databases. Age-progressed images were generated, the kind that show what a 7-year-old might look like at 40. A sketch of a life unrealized. The case remains open. But like so many Florida disappearances, it exists in a limbo of unresolved grief and procedural stasis, waiting for one witness, one phone call, one clue. And just 8 years later, another Sarasota woman, Andelka Morariu, would vanish while walking as well. But this time, the story was even stranger, because she left without changing out of her work clothes and never returned. Andelka Morariu, 62. The 28th of February, 2020, Street Petersburg, Florida. It was a chilly winter afternoon by Florida standards, mid-62nd, a light breeze. Andelka Morariu, 62 years old, clocked out of work and began walking home. But she never arrived. What makes her case unique isn't just the age factor. Disappearances among seniors aren't uncommon, but the specifics. Andelka was wearing her full work uniform when she vanished. Not just slacks and a blouse, but her name tag, badge, and company ID. She hadn't gone home to change. She hadn't taken a break. She simply walked away and never came back. There were no signs of struggle, no reports of unusual behavior. She didn't suffer from any diagnosed conditions that might explain disorientation. She wasn't known to wander. She wasn't out for a jog. She was still in her professional attire, heading along a familiar route. When she didn't show up at home that evening, her family grew immediately concerned. She was punctual, predictable, the kind of person who called if she was going to be 5 minutes late. Police searched the immediate area. They checked security footage from local businesses. No luck. Her last known location was somewhere near 34th Street North, a well-trafficked corridor filled with strip malls, restaurants, and bus stops. But not one camera caught her image. Not one witness saw her pass. Her purse and phone were at home. Her car was untouched. Her apartment looked undisturbed. There was no note, no warning. Just one missing woman in a navy blue work shirt, walking off the face of the earth. To this day, no evidence has emerged. No sightings, no leads. Andelka's family has worked closely with law enforcement, hosting vigils and media events to keep her name alive. But each year that passes deepens the mystery. She would be 67 now, and her disappearance, like so many others in the Florida cold case vault, remains a chilling riddle. A final act with no epilogue, a door that closed without sound. And in 2017, another woman in Naples would leave a house, seemingly just stepping outside for a moment, and vanish into the humid silence. Her name was Diana Lee Venegas, and her case would become another brick in Florida's long, aching wall of missing. Diana Lee Venegas, 35. The 13th of September, 2017, Naples, Florida. The last known sighting of Diana Lee Venegas was ordinary, frustratingly ordinary. She stepped out of a house in East Naples where she had been staying with friends. It was sometime in the afternoon. She didn't say much. No dramatic exit. No visible distress. She left behind her personal belongings, her purse, her identification, and even her phone. She walked out the door and disappeared. To this day, not a single confirmed sighting has been made. Not one phone call. No text. No security footage showing her on the street, or boarding a bus, or walking into a store. Nothing. Diana was 35 years old at the time. A mother, a daughter, a friend. She was described by those who knew her as sweet and soft-spoken, but private someone who kept her pain close to the vest. She had been through hard times, including struggles with addiction and recovery, and like many adults trying to pull their lives back into focus, she was in a state of transition. That doesn't make her unique. But what makes her case stand out is just how fast the silence set in and how total it became. The house she was staying at was in a residential area, not far from major roads. It wasn't isolated. The neighborhood had traffic, neighbors, activity. Someone should have seen something. But no one did. No one even heard anything unusual. 1 minute she was there, and the next, she was gone. When her friends realized she hadn't come back by that evening, they waited. Maybe she just needed some air. Maybe she was visiting someone. Maybe she went for a walk. But when the sun rose and there was still no word, concern turned to alarm. Her family, especially her children and relatives back in California, quickly jumped in. Flyers went up. Social media posts circulated. Her case made it into the local news. But despite the attention, there was no break in the case. No witnesses, no credit card activity, no digital trail. Investigators searched the surrounding areas. Swamps, ditches, wooded patches. They questioned people in the house, canvassed neighbors, asked about her mental state, but no clues emerged. Her family insisted she would not have left without contacting someone, especially not her children, and not without her belongings. Over time, the usual theories emerged. Maybe she'd relapsed and wandered off. Maybe she'd met with foul play. Maybe she'd planned to leave and was picked up by someone. Each possibility raised 1,000 more questions. But none of them came with evidence. Not even a trace. Diana's case remains unsolved. Her name appears in national missing persons databases, but little has been added to the file since the initial investigation. It sits in that limbo where so many adult disappearances end up technically open, realistically cold. She would be in her 42nd today. Her children, now older, are growing up with a mother-shaped question mark hanging over their memories. No answers, no closure. Just a door that opened one day in Naples and never closed behind her. And in 2005, just up the road in Sarasota, another woman, Carrie Lisa Jones, would disappear under equally mysterious circumstances. A short walk near a friend's house, a moment of separation, and then nothing. Carrie Lisa Jones, 45. May 2005, Sarasota, Florida. Carrie Lisa Jones had been staying with a friend when she stepped out one afternoon and never returned. There was no dramatic goodbye, no argument, no indication that something was wrong. She was 45 years old, and she vanished like smoke in the Florida Sunday. Details about Carrie's final hours are frustratingly thin. She was last seen near the home of a friend, reportedly heading off on foot. She didn't have a car with her. She didn't take anything substantial. Just her clothes and whatever she had in her pockets. Like so many missing persons, Carrie left behind a story with no ending and very few middle chapters. She had a history, of course. Everyone does. Carrie had struggled with mental health issues in the past. She was known to be transient at times, couch surfing, staying with friends, occasionally homeless. But she wasn't a stranger to the people around her. She had a daughter, family members, people who loved her, and they knew this was different. When Carrie didn't come back that night, no one panicked at first. It wasn't out of character for her to be out of contact for a bit. But days passed, then a week. No calls, no sightings, no word. That's when friends contacted police, and the search began. It started small, a few blocks, local shelters, hospitals. Then it widened. Flyers, missing persons bulletins, even newspaper notices. But Carrie didn't surface. And over time, the urgency faded. Her case never made major headlines. It didn't become the subject of a true crime series. There were no podcasts or breaking news updates. Just a woman's name filed under missing adult, her photo slowly fading on community bulletin boards and online databases. But to her family, Carrie was more than just a file. She was a mother, a sister, a daughter. Her disappearance left a silence that grew heavier each year. Her daughter, especially, never stopped looking, never stopped wondering what happened that day and why no one could find her. Authorities believe Carrie likely met with foul play. They say the lack of digital activity, the abruptness of her disappearance, and the total silence that followed suggest something more sinister than simply walking away. But with no physical evidence, no witnesses, and no clear suspect, the case remains unsolved. She would be in her 62nd now. Her name is still listed in the Sarasota County Cold Case Archives. Her photo, frozen in time, shows a woman smiling with weathered eyes like she's already lived through 100 storms. Maybe she had. But whatever took her away did it without warning, without witnesses, and without a trace. And just 7 years later, not far from where Carrie vanished, an elderly man named Newton Whidden would also disappear in Sarasota. His case, unlike most, would start with a van and end with a question mark. Newton Humphrey Whidden, 85. The 20th of August, 2012, Sarasota, Florida. At 85 years old, Newton Whidden was still active, sharp-minded, independent. He lived in a mobile home park near Tuttle Avenue. On the morning of the 20th of August, he got into his white 1998 Dodge Caravan and drove away. No one has seen him since. His case is a different kind of mystery. Newton wasn't vulnerable in the way most elderly missing persons are. He wasn't suffering from severe cognitive issues. He wasn't in poor health. He had family nearby. He lived a structured, habitual life. And yet on that day, he left and vanished completely. The van, white with faded paint, also disappeared. It has never been recovered. No license plate sightings, no highway cameras, no evidence it was ever abandoned or sold. It's as if both Newton and his vehicle simply fell off the map. Police believe he may have been heading to a local store, or possibly to visit someone. But without a clear itinerary, their timeline is limited. His bank account was never touched again. His phone went unanswered. His neighbors reported nothing unusual. What makes his case particularly eerie is how little changed in the days that followed. There was no sign of foul play, no indication of struggle. Just a van missing from the driveway and a man who had never left without saying goodbye. Authorities put out silver alerts, searched the area by land and air. Nothing. The roads turned up empty. The van, even after over a decade, has never been spotted, not even a single part. Newton's family remains baffled. They've searched rural roads, canals, lakes, anywhere a vehicle might have ended up. Still, no answers. At 85, Newton Humphrey Whidden became one of the oldest people ever listed on Florida's long list of active missing persons. His case remains open. His van remains on national watch lists. But there has been no resolution, just one man, one vehicle, and the haunting silence of a road never retraced. And in 1985, 4 decades earlier and 200 miles away in Miami, another disappearance would emerge, this time involving someone much younger, a toddler named Alicia Guzman Padilla. A case complicated not by mystery, but by family. Alicia Guzman Padilla, 2, The 9th of January, 1985, Miami, Florida. The disappearance of Alicia Guzman Padilla began not with sirens or search teams, but with paperwork, custody filings, immigration records, and a swirl of family conflict that would eventually swallow a 2-year-old child whole. Alicia was last seen in the company of her mother, Maria Guzman, in early January 1985. At the time, Maria and Alicia were involved in a complex custody battle with Alicia's father, who had legal guardianship and claimed Maria had taken their daughter without consent. The court ruled in the father's favor, but before Alicia could be returned to him, she vanished. Just like that. No dramatic exit, no runaway car, just a toddler and her mother disappearing into the haze of Miami's crowded, fast-moving streets, the kind of place where people disappear in plain sight. From the beginning, law enforcement treated the case not as an abduction by a stranger, but as a possible custodial interference, albeit one with no resolution. There were no signs of violence, no evidence of criminal conspiracy, just a belief that Maria had taken her daughter and fled, possibly to another state, or maybe to another country. Alicia, born in 1982, would be over 40 years old today, but what makes her case so maddening is the complete lack of verified information. There were early reports that Maria had family in Texas, others that suggested she might have returned to Puerto Rico or traveled to Mexico, but none of these leads ever produced results. No sightings. No confirmed travel records. No updated identity. Just 2 people who vanished beneath the radar and stayed there. For years, the father, whose name was kept out of most early media coverage to protect the child's privacy, tried to pursue the case through the legal system. Courts were involved. Warrants were issued. But the years wore on, and the trail grew colder. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children still lists Alicia as missing. An age-progressed photo shows what she might look like as an adult. But there's no confirmed data on where she is, or if she's even aware she's listed as a missing person. If Maria did raise her under a different name, it's entirely possible Alicia grew up never knowing the story, never knowing that she was part of a case. And that's the strange duality of Alicia's disappearance. It's both a tragedy and a bureaucratic maze, a mystery with a suspect who may have just slipped out of reach. There's no concrete evidence of harm, no crime scene, no physical clue, just a girl removed from her father's care and never seen again. To this day, Alicia's case remains open, not because there's hope she's still a toddler needing rescue, but because there's still hope she's out there alive, unaware, or maybe silently waiting to be found. And while Alicia's disappearance was tied to a custody conflict, the case of Linda Louise Kerr in 1976 bore none of those complications. Just a teenage girl who walked out the front door and never returned. Linda Louise Kerr, 15. The 18th of February, 1976. Orlando, Florida. 15-year-old Linda Kerr left her house around 3 p.m., wearing a white shirt, blue jeans, and a light jacket. She told her family she was going to meet a friend. It was a Wednesday, a normal midweek routine. But Linda never arrived at her destination. She never came back home, and in the nearly 5 decades since that afternoon, no trace of her has ever been found. Linda's disappearance fits into a pattern all too familiar in Florida's long archive of missing persons. A young woman, walking in broad daylight, gone without a struggle, a witness, or a sound. She was a sophomore in high school, described by family as outgoing, sharp, and reliable. She had plans, friends, a future. And when she didn't return home by nightfall, her family knew something was wrong. Orlando police initially treated the case as a runaway. It was the 1972nd. Teens ran off. The idea that something more sinister had happened was not always the default assumption. But Linda's parents pushed back hard. She wasn't the type to run. She hadn't taken clothes, money, or anything from the house. No argument, no warning signs, just gone. Days turned into weeks, weeks into years. Flyers went out across Central Florida. Her school, her neighborhood, even surrounding counties were canvassed, but no sightings, no phone calls, no updates. Linda's case never went cold in the emotional sense. Her family never stopped remembering. But the investigation stalled. No leads, no suspects, no evidence. Just a high school portrait staring back from missing persons posters year after year. The strangest part? There was nothing in Linda's life to suggest this would happen. She had a stable home life. She wasn't involved with anyone dangerous. No signs of trouble at school or with friends. It was a case of pure vanishing, the kind that makes investigators lose sleep and makes families live in permanent rewind. In the early 2000s, Orlando law enforcement reopened Linda's file as part of a cold case initiative. DNA from family members was entered into the national database. They looked into possible connections with known predators operating in the area during the 1972nd. But no match has ever been made, no body recovered, no resolution given. Linda would be in her 62nd now, a lifetime lost. Her face lives on in age-progressed images and in the memories of those who were young with her friends now grown, parents now gone, but her absence still fresh. And in 2000, nearly a quarter century after Linda disappeared, another adult in Miami would vanish under even stranger circumstances along with his car. His name was Kitson Rowe, and he didn't walk away. He drove off and was never seen again. Kitson Rowe, 50. The 29th of January, 2000, Miami, Florida. Kitson Rowe got into his white 1991 Mercedes-Benz and drove off. He hasn't been seen since. 50 years old, Jamaican-born, a well-known figure in his local Caribbean-American community. Kitson had lived in the U.S. for years, working in various sectors and maintaining strong ties with family and friends, both locally and abroad. He was dependable, grounded, a man of habits, and then just like that he disappeared. There were no warning signs, no crisis, no threats. He didn't have known enemies. His personal and financial life appeared stable. On that late January day, he left his residence, got into his car, and vanished. Not just the man, the vehicle too. No sightings of either. The search began fast. Family members knew this wasn't like him. They alerted authorities. His information was distributed to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. A bolo was issued for the white Mercedes. But the car was never found. No license plate hits, no abandoned vehicle, no wreck, nothing. Law enforcement considered every angle. Did Kitson choose to leave? Was he fleeing something unknown? But again, no financial transactions, no passport activity, no goodbye notes. Nothing suggesting an intentional disappearance. As days passed, suspicions grew. One theory suggested that he may have been the victim of a carjacking. Miami in the late 92nd and early 2002 had a notable uptick in car theft and violent crime. But carjackings leave behind a trail wreckage, witnesses, stolen items. This case left only silence. Another possibility involved business dealings gone wrong. But again, no connections to criminal activity could be confirmed. If there was trouble, it left no footprint. The car remains one of the biggest mysteries. A full-size Mercedes doesn't just disappear without a trace. But it did. No license plate hits, no sightings, no VIN match in any state or salvage yard. The case has remained stagnant. With no leads, no evidence, and no recovered vehicle, it's as if Kitson Rowe was absorbed into the asphalt of Miami itself. He would be in his 72nd now. His name rarely appears in the media. His face rarely resurfaces. But for his family, the absence is permanent. The mystery still active, the grief still sharp. And in Jacksonville in 2020, another man would take a walk on foot with only a small pack and never be seen again. His name was Stephen Jack McGovern. His story is one more entry in Florida's long catalog of people who left quietly and never came back. Stephen Jack McGovern, 35. The 13th of July, 2020, Jacksonville, Florida. It was a summer Monday, hot and sticky, the kind of day where even the early hours felt like standing inside a damp oven. At around 10 a.m., 5-year-old Stephen Jack McGovern was last seen walking near the intersection of Lem Turner Road and Leonid Road in the northern part of the city. He had a small backpack. No vehicle, no phone, just himself, and then he was gone. Stephen's disappearance is a uniquely frustrating one. He wasn't a transient. He wasn't a drifter. He had family. He had routines. He was described as private, thoughtful, and kind, though he had recently been navigating a rough patch. But nothing about him suggested he would just walk away forever. And yet, no one has seen or heard from him since. The details of that day are sparse. Stephen was spotted by at least one witness who knew him. He appeared calm, composed. He was walking alone. He had his backpack slung over one shoulder, but carried no phone, wallet, or visible money. There were no signs of distress, no unusual behavior. He wasn't running, he wasn't lost. He was just walking. And then, no one saw him again. When Stephen failed to return home or contact anyone, concern quickly escalated. His family filed a missing persons report. Police responded swiftly, canvassing the surrounding area. It's a mixed-zone residential blocks, industrial spaces, stretches of undeveloped land. It's the kind of place where someone could disappear in a dozen different directions. But no cameras picked him up. No transactions were logged. His social media went dark. His name didn't appear in hospital records, shelters, or arrest logs. It was like he stepped into the background noise of the city and never emerged. Theories emerged fast. Some thought he might have wandered off intentionally, seeking solitude. Others wondered if something more serious had happened. An accident, an encounter gone wrong. But there were no signs, no footprints, no discarded items, not even the backpack. Search teams scoured the area on foot and by air. Flyers were distributed. His photo, short dark hair, quiet eyes, the kind of face that blends into a crowd, circulated widely across Florida missing persons forums. But the case generated little media traction. Another adult male, another silent disappearance in a state full of them. His family, desperate for answers, pushed for more attention. They emphasized how out of character this was, that Stephen wasn't the kind of man who vanished without telling someone, that he didn't have a history of mental health issues or addiction, that something had to have happened. But as the weeks turned into months, the silence hardened. Stephen would be 39 today. His file remains active with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, but there have been no major developments. Just another man who went for a walk and never came back. And in 2023, another Florida man, this time in Tampa, would also disappear under unusual circumstances. His name was Michael William Ross. His family said he'd been struggling with health issues, and when he didn't come home, their concern turned immediately into dread. Michael William Ross, 67. The 28th of February, 2023, Tampa, Florida. Michael William Ross was 67 when he left his home in Tampa and never returned. He wasn't a recluse. He wasn't in crisis. But he had been struggling with health problems, physical and cognitive, and that made his sudden disappearance all the more urgent. He left on foot, alone. No vehicle, no phone, no money, just the clothes on his back. His family believes he may have become disoriented or confused. He had been showing signs of memory loss in recent months, possibly early dementia, though nothing had been officially diagnosed. But whatever his intent was when he walked away that day, he never made it back. The area he disappeared from is urban, but with pockets of wild growth canals, wooded lots, overpasses, and unlit alleys. It's not hard to imagine someone getting turned around. But Michael had lived in the area for years. He knew the streets. He walked often. It wasn't unusual for him to take short trips by foot. What was unusual was the silence that followed. When he didn't return by nightfall, his family immediately reported him missing. They organized neighborhood searches, printed flyers, reached out to local shelters and hospitals. Police joined the search within hours, but no trace of Michael was found. Not a single witness. No surveillance footage. No signs of a fall or injury. Just a man who had been walking the same routes for years, suddenly vanished. Because of his age and health, a silver alert was issued quickly, but it yielded nothing. No tips, no sightings. Search dogs were deployed. They followed a scent for a short distance, but then lost it near a busy intersection. The assumption? He may have gotten onto public transportation or been picked up by someone. But if so, where did he go? And why did no one see him? Michael's case remains under investigation, but resources are thin. As with many adult disappearances, especially involving individuals with health conditions, the window for effective search narrows quickly. His family remains active, calling media, checking morgue records, following up on even the most far-fetched tips, but the trail is stone cold. He would be 69 today. There's been no digital footprint, no medical claims, no sightings, just the echo of footsteps on a Tampa sidewalk and a family still waiting by the phone. And in October of that same year, on Halloween night in Orlando, one more person barefoot, alone, would walk into the darkness and become Florida's most recent enduring mystery. Elizabeth May Canada, 41, the 31st of October, 2023. Orlando, Florida. The last known image of Elizabeth May Canada is as haunting as it is ordinary. A barefoot woman in her early 42nd, walking alone on Halloween night, heading away from a residential neighborhood in Orlando. She was last seen near Raleigh Street and Mercy Drive, an area known for its mix of apartments, corner stores, and wide, cracked sidewalks. She was barefoot, not dressed for travel. She didn't appear to be in distress, but she also didn't look like someone with a plan. And then, she was gone. Elizabeth was 41, a woman described by her loved ones as vibrant, creative, and, at times, intensely private. She had faced her share of personal struggles, including health issues, both mental and physical, but she wasn't known to vanish. She had a routine. She stayed in contact with her family. So when no one heard from her the next day, alarms went up immediately. What made her disappearance so strange was how visible it was and how little came of it. Witnesses recalled seeing her. Several, in fact. She was barefoot, moving slowly, quiet. Some thought she looked tired. Others assumed she was in costume. It was Halloween, after all. But when the sun rose and she didn't return home, concern turned quickly into fear. Orlando police opened a missing persons investigation within 48 hours. They reviewed security footage from nearby gas stations, convenience stores, traffic cams. The problem? There was no confirmed footage of her after that one final sighting. It was as if the night swallowed her whole. Search teams canvassed the area. Local lakes were dragged. Abandoned buildings were checked. Nothing. No shoes, no bag, no sign of Elizabeth. And the deeper they dug, the stranger it got. Her phone had been turned off, her bank account untouched, no known transportation taken. She hadn't packed a bag, hadn't told anyone she was leaving, hadn't argued with anyone. There was no precipitating event, just a barefoot walk on Halloween night and a total erasure afterward. She would be 42 now. Her case remains fresh, open, and active, but the leads have already slowed. Her family, stunned and grieving, continues to search. They hold on to hope. They push for media coverage. But so far, the only thing that's surfaced is silence. And like the 32 who came before her on this list, Elizabeth has become another question mark in Florida's long and haunted history of missing persons. A barefoot woman on Halloween, fading into the night like a ghost no one thought was real until she was gone.